Okay, so we've recorded our drums, we got our drum sound, and now it's time to start mixing. So where do we start? Um, Let me play you the drum sound we have, and then I'm gonna solo the kick and the snare, and then we'll move on. So let's do that right now. So here's our drum sound. Everything's at 0. I don't have a balance yet. So here we go. Okay, not bad. So the first thing I like to do is just get an overall balance of my drum set. I turn this master fader up. This master fader is what the kick, snare, rack, floor, and the two overheads are dumping into. So kind of like a master volume, and that way I can see where how much audio, how much headroom I have once they're dumping in there. So I want to make sure that I don't push these too high to where I'm not leaving room once we bring in other instruments and then we start getting close to clipping because we don't want to clip. That's bad. So I'm just gonna play. Everything's up the middle except for the overheads are pan hard left and hard right, but I want to just move around with the pan knobs and then get an overall balance of the whole drums. So let's do that. Okay, now that we have our balance, I want to talk about gates and expanders. And what a gate is let me play this kick, and you're gonna hear the kick, but you're also gonna hear some of the snare and snare bleed coming through the mic because it's close to the kick, and the toms and probably some of the cymbals. So let me turn this kick up just a little bit, and I'll bring it back down to 0 once we're done. But I want you to listen to the in between after the kicks. Okay, so what a gate will do is pretty much like it says, we'll open a gate when the kick hits, and it'll let the gate through, and then when the kick's done, it'll close the gate, and then it won't let any audio pass. So it's a good way if you have a lot of mic bleed from other mics bleeding into the kick, like snare, toms, crash, anything, cymbals bleeding into your kick mic, and you would start EQing the kick, and then you would also be EQing that bleed, which would kind of affect the whole drum sound. And if you have a lot of bleed in all the mics and you're EQing like the kick individually, the snare individually, and then you EQ what you think sounds good, but then all that bleed's getting EQ'd and compressed, and so you might end up with a mess. And a lot of times people leave some of the bleed. Having a little bit of bleed, if it sounds good, is good because it makes a more natural drum sound. So if you don't want to get rid of all the bleed, you can use something called an expander, and it's pretty much the same thing. Pro Tools has a plugin called, it's a dynamics plugin called expander gate. So what an expander will do is will just kind of turn down the audio in between the hits you want, and it doesn't completely get rid of it. So you have two options there, and it's also good for like a live situation. So if you're a live sound engineer and you have guitars blaring on stage, vocals blaring on stage, you can put gates on like the kick and the snare. You can put gates on guitars, and you can only let the kick come through when you want it and shut everything else off, and you can let the guitars come through when you want it and shut everything else off. You just have to make sure you adjust the controls correctly, so you're not like cutting off the signal too soon or having it open at a weird time. So let's go over how to set up this. So I have the kick on. I'm turning it up just so we can hear what we're doing. And I like starting with the preset just to get me in the ballpark, and then I can adjust the controls according to how my kick and the volume that it's coming in at. So I'm gonna start with a gate. So kick, gate. I'll just do kick, gate right here, and let's see what that does. I'm gonna have to adjust these controls, but let's see what it sounds like. So right now there's nothing coming through. That's because the threshold, this little arrow right here, this is what this adjusts. So it wasn't even low enough to have the kick go over the threshold. And I'm going to get us to where we can get some kicks going. There we go. So let me adjust the threshold. All right. So a gate is, and its expander is set up like a compressor. You have the range, attack, hold, ratio, release, and threshold. So you want to adjust the threshold to where the signal you're trying to gate hits or goes over a little bit, and then you want to adjust the attack and release to make it sound natural, like a kick. You don't want to cut it off too soon. So I'm gonna do a fast release, and you'll hear it cut off too soon. Let me bypass that, and you'll hear what the kick sounds like by itself without a gate. So I still want to have that natural kick sound, so I'm going to let the release a little bit longer so it doesn't cut it off as short. You don't want to, you want to still have the breath of that kick after it's hit. And the hold kind of does the same thing as the release, so you can play around with the hold, longer hold times or shorter hold times until you get that sound you want. So I've gotten rid of all the stuff in between the kick hits. And then if you do that across the board, you can tighten up your drum kit a lot. If you want just a little bleed, then you would do a smaller, like a smaller ratio. And let's play with the knobs so we can still hear the snare, just not as loud, instead of the mic bleed, just not as loud. So we've dramatically turned down the snare hits, but still kept a little bit, try to keep that natural sound in there. So you would do that across the snare. So let's do that. Let's solo this guy and put a dynamics expander gate. And then again, I would start with a snare gate and then adjust according to my snare. Now you're thinking, well, I like the sound of the kick before the gate, but we're also gonna bring in these overheads as well. So you're still gonna get a lot more of the kick sound that's in the room, the overheads. We don't have room mics on this one because we're limited with space, but just bear with me. So let's go to the rack tom. So let's see here. Here's a good hit right there. So there's two ways we can get rid of this bleed in the toms, and I'm going to show you the gate way, and then I'm going to show you the second way that we can use in Pro Tools. I'm not going to show you a bunch of editing drums because I'm in Pro Tools, and a lot of you might be on different DAWs, and so it might be specific. I don't want to do anything that you can't do in your DAW because I'm familiar with Pro Tools editing, but I did want to show you something that Pro Tools has, and maybe your DAW has something similar, but I'm pretty positive that every one of your DAWs has some kind of gate. So that's why I'm going to start with those. So let's put the gate on the rack tom. And let's just start there and tweak. So you hear how when the gate's off, that attack, the initial attack of the tom, and when it's on, kind of sounds weird. Well, look at my attack; it's too long, so I want to shorten the attack, so you get that aggressiveness of the first hit of the tom. That sounds pretty good to me. Okay. The other way you can do it in Pro Tools is something called strip silence. So it's Command U on a Mac, and then I would highlight that. Let me blow this up. Whoops. So what I'm trying to do is set I'm going to strip the audio that I don't want out of the track. So I would set this strip threshold to just hit those tom hits, and then like that. Let me get rid of this guy. There we go. So just want to hit the tom hits, and then so it's starting right there with that tom, and then I want the duration a little bit longer. Come on now. There we go. And you would hit strip, and it would get rid of all that stuff, and of course you would have to clean it up. But you could do that on your whole track, and it would just strip the in between out. But you might not have this, so I wouldn't worry about it. You can just put a gate on there. So let's get it back to that. and get rid of this and not worry about it. So the gate is working exactly the way I want it. All right, so let's go to the floor tom and do the same thing. I'm gonna copy and I'm gonna drag a copy of this and then see if it's set up good enough already for the floor tom. Let's adjust the threshold a little bit. Cool. So let me play those without the overheads. Let's get it to where we can. There we go. So you see when I deactivate the gates on the toms, on the rack and the floor tom, you get this weird low end rumble. That's because when the toms aren't hitting, you're still getting the mic bleed from the kick and the snare in the tom mics. So you get this information that you don't necessarily need. So it's just muddying up your tracks, up your drum track. So I'm gonna play it with the with the gates on the rack and the floor tom. And then I'm gonna deactivate these plugins, and that'll mean that there's no gating going on, and you'll get the bleed from the kick into your rack and floor toms, and you'll hear it get muddy. So here's all together with the gates on. So dramatic difference, dramatic improvement. And then when you bring in the overheads, let me play it and then I'll bring them in. So it's just a way to tighten up your drum sound, to get it cleaned up, ready to do the next step, which is, in my case, I like to EQ. So that'll be the next video. So that was gates and expanders, and let's move on.